All right, so today's video is all about React Router version 6. Now, about 10 or 11 months ago, I did a video series on an updated version of React.js. So I'd done one a number of years ago, I updated it last year, and then a few weeks after I had released that playlist, React Router updated itself to version 6. So this video, I'm finally getting around to showing what the changes are, and I'm just going to go for this video and do a basic coverage of the main features in React Router 6, so how you can get up and running and use React Router 6. I will do another video, hopefully soon, about some of the more advanced features in React Router 6 and some of the data APIs that they include. But for now, this is all the fundamental routing stuff that you would need to know with React Router 6. So down in the description, you'll find a link to a repo, and the main branch of that repo, if you want to clone it, that will have all the starter files. So the point that I'm at right now in the project. So download, clone that repo, and then if you run npm install, it will install all the React stuff, and you'll be at the exact point that I'm at right now. So what I had run was npx create React app, and then the name of the folder. So it did that, and now I'm inside this folder. And this is what we need to add, React Router DOM. Now there's React Router DOM, there's React Router Native. That's if you're going to be using React Router for your React Native project. But we're going to use React Router DOM because this is for the web. So we'll just npm install React Router DOM. So we do that. That'll just take a moment to install. And then in our package.json file, we'll see, here we have it, version 6.4 of React Router DOM. Now, if you've run, hopefully, npm install already with your copy of this, then you'll have React, React DOM, React scripts. Those things will be installed and ready for you to use. Anytime we're wanting to test this, I've already run the command, but or I've done it once, but I need to do it again here. npm start. This is going to start our React project running in the browser. So here we go. This is what we have right now. Black screen, white text, there's a header, and that's all we have inside of here. Now, if you've got the console, you'll see there's no errors. Inside of here, the React Dev Tools, if you have those installed in Chrome, then you can go to components and you can always look and see what you've got. So this is the app component right here. This is all that we've got. There's no props. It was created by React create root from React DOM. That's where we are. So let's get started. We've got React Router DOM installed in our project now, so we can actually jump into it. So that's all the setup. Let's get into using this. With React Router, you need to have some sort of context provider up at the top level. Now we can do that right here inside of index.js or inside of our app.js. So I can wrap it around this whole thing, or I could wrap it around the header, or I could put it below the header and wrap other content. Wherever I put it, I just have to make sure that my provider that I'm going to choose is going to be wrapping everything and anything in my app that needs to use features like links. So if I'm creating links that need to have their navigation controlled by React Router, those have got to be inside of it. All of my routes have to be inside it. So I'm just going to take the simple route right here, and I'm going to, no pun intended there, I'm going to put my browser router here right at the top level. So there it is. I have my router provider up at the top level, and that means anywhere inside my application, anywhere that I build, in this component, in the app component, or anywhere else, anywhere I have it, I'm going to be able to use this browser router from React Router DOM and all the features, except for a few of the data APIs. That's going to be the subject of the future video. Browser router and hash router, those are the two main ones that you're probably going to use. Browser router for most instances, but if you're in a hosting environment where you can't use necessarily the root directory, you can't get to that point. There's an extra folder in the way, so you have no control over that part of the route, and you want to use the hash value. So the hashtag and everything that comes after it, if you want to use that as the routing, you just stay on one page and then the hash value gets used. Then hash router is what we can put here instead. With the brand new data APIs, we're going to be using a new thing called Create Browser Router. And I'll show you how that works in a future video. For now, just have this at somewhere near the top level. So I've imported it from React Router DOM. There it is. And we have the component here. And that's it. We're done with index.js now. So jumping into app.js, I'm going to build myself a nav component. And then I'm going to set up my routes right here. So let's create inside of here a nav.js file. And it's going to return. This is going to be my very simple navigation. And I want to have link. So I just hit enter there to do the automatic importing. This link component from React Router DOM is the thing that's going to allow us to have React Router control the navigation. So it's kind of like I'm building an anchor tag here. Instead of href, I say to. Okay, if I have that, then I'm going to go to the home page. This is the text the user is going to see. I'm going to be going here. And I'm going to wrap this inside of an HTML5 nav element. And then eventually all my nav links are going to go inside of here. Okay, so save that. There's nav. We will import this. And we'll add more nav links in there very soon. All right. So here is our nav link. When I click on that, it's taking me to this home page. There's nothing here. It's just the /. I'm right at the root of this project. So that's what this link does. Link takes me to that route. Okay, simple enough. Let's build a few more links just for our navigation. So let's say that there's a users page. Let's say that there is a specific user page. So users and then some user ID. So this is all users. This is user 123. Now you wouldn't normally put this in a navigation menu, but I want to have a link to show that we can use some parameters like this. And then I'm going to have one for myself. So the logged in user we're going to be simulating here. So user me. All right, so there's my links. Home, all users, user 123, user me. I'll zoom in here a little bit for you. So these are working. These are changing this path right here, but I have no routing whatsoever. So it doesn't really matter what I put in the parameters right here. React Router is saying, okay, yeah, I'm just going to let whatever route you put in there take us to the home page because we haven't defined anything. We haven't defined a way to handle changes in these routes. So we have these values. Let's build some routes for them. So nav, that's built, being used to send us to different places. Inside here, and this is new with React Router 6, there is a new element called routes. Now mine didn't automatically import here, so let's add that. We need to import this instead of switch. In version 5 of React Router, we had a switch element that wrapped around all the route elements. So routes is the new replacement from that, and it does work a little bit better actually, so I'll explain some of the differences there in just a moment. So this is going to be from React Router DOM. Okay. Now inside of here, so with the switch, you had to really think about how your routes were being built. You had to write them in the correct order, and switch would find the first route that matched. With routes, we can say, I've got a whole bunch of routes here. They're going to be self-closing like this. So I'll throw a bunch of these inside of here like this. The routes command is going to look at all of these and say, whichever one is the best match, that's the one I'm going to apply. So for each of them, we're going to specify a path. So one of them is going to be our home. One's going to be the users, one that we were defining. We'll say users, and then this is the 1, 2, 3 that I wrote in the links over here. This 1, 2, 3, this is going to become a variable called ID. And then my last one would be that me. There we are. So I've defined the routes. Now I have to say how I want to handle each one of these things. And something new with the routes now is that we specify an element. Now this has to be either null or an actual element. I'm going to put null in there. We'll replace each one. I just don't want anything to break while I'm doing it. Now I will, normally you would be creating all of these elements, these components, as files of their own. Just to keep this simpler, I'm going to create them all within this one file. This isn't what you would want to do with a big project, but I'm going to do it here just for simplicity's sake. So let's create one called home. So we have that, and it's going to return an HTML main element with an H2 inside of it. And we'll just say this is home. And I'm going to repeat this for the other elements. So one called home, one is going to be called users. Now let's go up here. We'll change this one to home. Now, with the old routes, version 5 routes, you would be using component, and inside of here you would just write home like this. You'd be importing home and then using it. Here, element, this is actually JSX that we're writing. So we need to add the angle bracket tags like this. So for users, it'll be that. And then we're going to create different ones for the ID and the me. They're going to be very similar, but we'll just put them in here. So this would be user, and we'll call this user me. We'll get that number in just a minute. Okay, so we've got these other components, user and user me, and we'll stick them in here. Now you can leave nulls inside of there, and that's going to work just fine. But now we have our routes. They're matching these, so we should be able to just navigate between those. So home, all users, user 1, 2, 3, and all about me. So as we change these, we are displaying different components. So those are being rendered down here. We still have our header, we still have our nav bar, and that's always there. Those are never being removed. But this component down here is being rendered, removed, and rendered and removed, and rendered and removed. So we have all of these here. Great. Now what about handling unknown paths? With that, much easier now. All we have to do is this. Path with a splat, the asterisk. You put that inside there and you're saying routes is looking at all of these, looking for the best match. So if it doesn't find a good match within any of these, even if this was up at the top, if it didn't find a good match for any of these, this is the one that it's going to build. And I'm just going to build one called Dono. All right, and that is, if it's not one of these defined ones, let's change this and say just some gibberish. There we go. We're doing no idea what page I should show. So that's working for us. And there we go. We're back to home. All right. So those are the basic routes, just if you've got one page at a time, one component at a time that's showing home, users, user me, don't know, that's great. But there is also nested routing. And nested routing means I may have a component that's showing, and then inside that component, there's another one. So there's another layer of routing that's happening. Now here, it would make sense to do it because I've got users and then users slash something, user slash something. So these two right here, I'm going to nest these inside of this one right here. So these two are now nested inside of users. But when I save this, there would be a problem if I saved it right now, because all nested routes in React Router version 6 are relative. So we do this, and we do this. So it's saying, okay, if you're at the root, fine. If you're at the root slash this, fine. If you're at root slash this or slash this, then I want to show users and I want to show these. Okay, so let's take a look and see what we're getting here now. Okay, so we've got home, not a problem, all users, as expected, user 123, it's showing users, user me, it's showing users. So I'm no longer seeing these things, even though in these routes I have this defined. But what we've said is that anytime you have this, show this. Doesn't matter about the stuff inside. We're showing this component if this is in the route. Now, with these, there's also more stuff to show. So it's kind of like this is the container for these things. And if I want these to show up, I have to say where I want them to appear within users. That's what this nested routing is all about. So we'll do this. We'll come inside of users, and we create an element called outlet. This is going to be the place where it wants to display them. There we go. User X, all about me, all users, it's not showing up. I'll just jump over here so it stops highlighting things. Home, all users, user 123, we get all users plus the nested stuff. So we're getting this extra layer of routing. This is the nested routing. All right, so we have outlet, and that is going to be a placeholder for any of these. Now, we could add another splat inside of here and say, okay, if it comes to users and it's something other than this or this, now this is going to grab everything that me doesn't grab, so wouldn't do anything in this instance, but you could add another splat at this point. Another way that we can do nested routing is by actually putting another routes component inside of another element. So inside of users, I can add another routes. So I'll leave the outlet there. I can have multiple layers of routing going on. So routes inside of here. There we go. I'll take these two and I'll paste them down here. And now we have an outlet, which is going to automatically display the one that's defined up at top, and then another routes that's going to work to do the same thing. There we go. So we've got two different versions of nested routing that we can use to display these things. All right. Now, coming back to this part, this X, if I want to extract that ID property from the URL, there is a hook that we can use called useParams. So I can say params equals useParams. That will go and grab all the parts of the URL. If there was multiple variables, it would grab all of those. So ID slash something else, if there was something nested inside of that, it could grab it. However, I'm going to use destructuring here to make this a little bit easier. So instead of writing a variable and then having to get the ID out of that, I will just do it all at once with destructuring. So there we are. There is ID being extracted from the URL, and I will replace this X with my ID variable. And there we are, 1, 2, 3. And if this was a different value, we'd have that. All right, one other thing that we can do with outlet is we can pass information down. So we know that in users, we are displaying potentially 2 different components. Maybe there's more, but we know that there's at least 2 different components that we're going to be displaying here inside of users. Users uses the outlet element to display these things. So right here, this is what's loading the other 2, user and use me. We can add something inside of here called context. That is going to be able to pass data. It's kind of like a prop that gets passed down into these things. So context, and I'm going to pass an object, we'll call it Timmy, and I will get date.now. So I'll grab the current time, and every time users loads, this gets rendered, which means we calculate the current timestamp at the point in time where users gets loaded. Now, navigating back and forth between these 2 isn't going to change this value because these are inside of users. Users is not getting unmounted when we go back and forth here. Users never leaves the screen. It's only when we go to home and then back to users, that's when this will get rebuilt. So this object will get passed down, and we can use a hook down here inside of users, inside of user and use me. So we can use a hook down inside of user and use me. And we could say const context equals use outlet context. This is the hook that we're going to use, and that will grab whatever object is being passed in here. So it's a way to pass information, even though it's completely different pages that are doing this. So inside of user and inside of user me, both of these are going to get data passed down to them. So they can be sharing sort of state data that's coming from, now this could be a state variable. So it's state from users being passed down into the child components, user and use me. Now context could be null, because remember up here, we're using outlet to render it, but the second one that's on the page, this user and use me, these are not using outlet, so there's no outlet context that's being passed down. This outlet context is going to be null if it's the second version of that rendering. So we have to check and say, okay, I want to get Timmy. So it could be const Timmy or let Timmy. And that's going to be if context exists, if it's not null. And if that's the case, then Timmy is going to be context.timmy, else I'll do an empty string. And we'll add paragraph in here. There we go. So we'll just copy this down here. There we go. We'll save that. So regardless of which one we're in, there's the Timmy data. Timmy data is not coming in the second one because this one was not rendered using the outlet. This one was. All users, we don't have them, but we still haven't. So 974, it's still the same milliseconds. Over here, it's the same. But if I go to home and then back here, now it has changed. Every time I go to home, I get a different value because I've left all users and gone there. If I stay on all users, that value is not changing just because of where it's been rendered inside of here. Okay, so one last thing to show you, and that is here. We'll go into the, I'm going to create a different link just for this last one. It's going to work the same sort of way. The difference with navlink versus link is it has a special property called isActive that you can use to determine if this URL that I'm putting in here, if this route matches what's in the location bar, then isActive gets set to true. And you can use that to inside of your style or inside of class name. Inside of each of these, we get this property that we can then use to set something. So I'm going to be talking about the location object, the useLocation hook. So I'll just call it that. And I'll use this as my path. Inside of style, we can just put a style object in there if we want, or we get to put an actual function inside of there. So I'm going to put an arrow function inside of here, and there'll be an object passed in here, but I can destructure that to get my isActive component or property. I'll just space these out so we can see them a little bit better. We've got the same thing happening here. So we have a function, and this Boolean value is being set. So I can set whatever property I want inside of here. So I can say, okay, I'm creating an object here. Since this is an object, I have to wrap it in parentheses as well. I want to set the color property. If isActive is true, then the color is going to be red, else it's going to be gold. So that's going to be changing the styling. And it would be the same thing inside the class name. I don't need to put anything in there, but you can do the same sort of thing to decide what is the CSS class name that you want to apply to this anchor tag that's being built by this navlink. So there we are. It's gold. Now it's red. I go someplace else, back to gold. So that's this isActive property, switching the color of my text back and forth between red and gold. And that's really the difference between navlink and link, is that navlink has this isActive property that you can use to see, hey, I'm currently matching the URL, so I want to do something different with my style to indicate that this is the current link. Okay, so we've got all that. Now, useLocation. We've got to add this route. We'll come back into app, go back up to our routes at the top, and we'll add one more route in here. Path equals LOC, and the element, we'll call it LOC as well. This is the last thing that we want to add inside of here. Just to show the location hook, which is the other common one to use, we'll say that I'm going to use destructuring and useLocation. That is the hook. So we have useLocation, useOutletContext, useParams, those three hooks. Remember, params is for the portions, the variables that are inside the URL. This is passing data down to all the children that are being rendered by the outlet tag. And useLocation is anything that you need to get from the current URL. Path name, search, which is the query string, the hash value. Any of these things we can use to render stuff on the page. You can look at those values to do something with them. I will just keep this simple and I'll just write those out. So path name is just a string. Search is just a string. Hash, the hash value, is just a string. And one other thing that we can get in here, and that is the state variable. So we can get state that is passed down from our routes. Now our state values are actually going to be coming from here. Inside of our link elements, we can add state. And this can be an object that gets passed down. So we can contain any data that we want inside of here. So I'll just say val is 123 for this one. And inside of nav link, we can add that here as well. I'll see it's 456 here. Okay, so just to represent the fact that we can embed some data inside of here to be passed down through these links. And it's available here through the use location. So we have state coming in. Now, state is not a string. It is an object. So when I write this out, I will have to convert it. So I'll say json.stringify state. Okay, so we now, from this hook, get all these different bits and pieces from that. I'll jump back into the browser. So if I go to the location page, okay, so here's our path name, here's state. We don't have a query string, we don't have a hash value, but I can add those. So let's say ID equals this and name equals Bob. There we go. There's search, that's the search value. And then I will also add some hash value. There we go. So we can get the hash, we can get the query string, we can get the full path, and I don't have any state right now. I didn't click on this link to get it, but if I added all this into here, so when I'm going to this, what I'm actually doing is I want to pass all that in. So I click on this link. There we go. So I clicked on that link. That did the routing. It put all this stuff inside of there, and now I have access to all these things. So we can add all of those values inside of there. Now, if you need to programmatically navigate, this was just setting up the routes. There is another hook, one last hook, and we'll put that down here. We'll go to the home page for that one. Let's say we'll put it inside of here. Inside of home, there's a hook called use navigation. This hook is going to return a function to us. Usually it's called navigate. You can call it anything you want, but you can now, let's add a paragraph. We'll put an anchor tag inside of here, and we'll give it an on-click event. That's what it's going to say. And here's my function that's going to run inside of here. What I want to do is I want to navigate, and I'm going to go to my user's route. And that's all there is to it. So inside of home, oh, I've used the wrong one. Use navigation is what I wrote, but what we really want to be using is use navigate. This is the one that gives us the function, and use navigate. Use navigation is a valid hook. It is part of React Router 6. Let's just refresh that. Go home, go to users. I click on that. It takes me to users. So home, this is home. Click here. Now I'm on users. So that is the use navigate hook. The use navigation hook, where are we? Home? Yeah. So the use navigation one is part of React Router 6, but it's only available as part of those data APIs that I was talking about that will be in the other video. All right. So that's it. That is all the stuff that you need to know to really build whatever you want inside of React Router version 6 with your React app. If you have any questions, feel free to leave those in the comments. I answer as many as I have time for. This finished version that we've got right here, the code to this point, will be inside here. If I close this, the basic routes branch of the repo that's linked to down in the description, that is the finished code, the code up to this point. So this will be pushed up there. And that is it. So as always, thanks for watching.